Good morning. You're listening to the Mac and Jack Sports Show on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Mac and Jack Sports Show, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We're live on Mac Sports and the Northeast Streaming Sports Facebook pages. We're also on the Northeast Streaming Sports YouTube channel live, and we're also on Twitter and Twitch and Instagram, Jack. So, we're all over the place. Like, share, comment, please, and subscribe to the Northeast Streaming Sports YouTube channel for all the great NESSP shows. We have our website at nessp.info. Check it out. I'm Mac with your co-host, Jack Hirsch, legendary boxing writer and former president of the Boxing Writers Association of America, bringing you national sports with special focus on the Northeast professional sports from New York, Boston, and Philly. And folks, this is our This Week in Sports show. And we got an incredible show coming up for you today. We have former two-time Super Bowl champion from the Dallas Cowboys, Jeffcoat, joining us, Robert Butler from Skope, and Anthony Cervino from Fantasy Football Face-Off. Good morning, Jack.
Yeah, good morning, Mac.
Jack, we cover a lot of topics here on Sunday, and we never know when the biggest topic is coming up. And last night, in my opinion anyway, the biggest topic of the week came up with the passing of Marvin Hagler, the great, maybe arguably the greatest middleweight champion of all time. And a couple of thoughts I want to give you, and we're going to share a video of his first big fight. And then I'm going to turn the floor to you, Jack. When I first came into boxing was the Frazier-Ali first fight, the fight of the century, and I followed boxing from then on. And it was like, they took turns. The heavyweight division was in the headlines with Frazier, Ali, Foreman, and Norton. Then the welterweight division came of age with Sugar Ray Leonard, Hearns, Durant, the Cobra, even Marlon Starling. And it was very, very headline grabbing. Then the middleweight division took its turn. And Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard moved up, Hearns moved up, Durant moved up, and the middleweight division was probably the most popular division at that time. But Marvin started back in 1979 with a very his first title shot at the time with Vito Antuofermo. And before I turn the floor over to you, let me go ahead and see if I can share a video of the 15th round of that fight. And I know Vito Antuofermo is a personal friend of yours. You know him very well. So let's go ahead and see if I can do that. Bring up the final round of the Vito Antuofermo Marvin Hagler fight. And here we go, Jack.
And this is it, the final round. They touch gloves.
What a fight this was.
Toe-to-toe. Hagler with the right and the left that constituted the queen of blows.
We're getting a radio version right now, but radio used to be the golden thing in boxing. I love listening to fights on radio when they had it many moons ago.
Definitely.
One thing is clear. Oh! Vito rocked.
Howard Cosell in the classic voice.
And these guys, this fight was toe-to-toe almost all fight, Jack.
Hagler using the uppercut, then ripping Antuofermo with clean, sharp blows. Antuofermo doesn't go down, and Hagler. Vito coming back now. This will not, I don't think, be the easiest fight in the world to score. Two
You see, they're both exhausted.
Hagler now throwing the leather and with the clean of blows. And a Fermo now. Ebb and flow in less than 30 seconds left. And a Fermo now. Mills Lane doing the best he can. Tough to referee. And then a Fermo fight. Now it's Hagler. Toe to toe. Crowd on its feet. Look at the crowd.
There you go, Jack. What a fight that was. I mean, I could have easily wanted that to go another round. I mean, it was incredible. Let me see if I can cancel that.
Well, what had happened, Mac, when Hagler came up the hard way, and we had Philadelphia promoter Russell Peltz on the show. Hagler originally was born in Newark, but he settled in Brockton, Massachusetts, actually a few blocks from where Rocky Marciano grew up. And Hagler would fight the toughest fighters in Philadelphia. He'd go on the road. He came up the hard way, and he was avoided. It was difficult for him to get a title shot. He was a pro like 7 years. Finally, he got a shot at Vito Antuofermo, who was the world middleweight championship. And it ended in a controversial 15-round draw. Most people, in all fairness to Vito, felt that Hagler won the fight. Some felt that Vito won the fight. The punch stats and what the CompuBox count was fairly close. It showed Vito actually landing a higher percentage of power punches. But the consensus was that Hagler held a little edge. Some people felt he was robbed. That's maybe an opinion that was to the extreme. But in any event, it ended up as a draw. So Hagler had to wait an additional year. In the meantime, Vito lost the title in his next defense against Alan Minter on a controversial decision. And then Hagler went to England and stopped Alan Minter in 3 rounds. And it was stopped on the cut, but Minter was battered very badly. Okay. And when the doctor stopped the fight, Hagler got down on his hands and knees in the middle of the ring. And then the missiles went flying into the ring, the bottles and everything. It was a riot. And Hagler had to get ushered out of the ring, protected out of there, even though he basically destroyed Minter. But now he was the world middleweight champion, and he went on a long reign as middleweight champion to establish himself as one of the best of all time in that division.
So when Sugar Ray Leonard came up, Thomas Hearns came up, even Duran came up. He had fights with all 3 of these guys. I think, if I'm correct, Leonard beat him one time, if I'm correct, Jack.
Well, what happened, Hagler was your consummate lunch pail fighter. He's the equivalent. If you had to give him an everyday job and slot him in what he would be good at, he'd be a construction worker. You could see him with his lunch pail going to work, and Leonard would go into one of these fancy restaurants for lunch. Hagler would be with the lunch pail. So Hagler basically came up the hard way. Not that Leonard didn't. Let's not begrudge Leonard anything. But Hagler took him a while to get the recognition that he really craved. Finally, in 1983, November 10th, 1983, he fought Roberto Duran. Duran was a little past his peak, but Duran had just won the junior middleweight championship by knocking out Davey Moore. And Hagler won a 15-round decision. The scorecards had it close, but in reality, Hagler won 10 of the 15 rounds. It really wasn't that close, even though the judges had it that way. And Hagler was tentative in that performance. And Duran had a lot to do with it because he was a ring master. So then Hagler adopted the mantra, destruct and destroy. And that took him into the Tommy Hearns fight 2 years later, in which he stopped Hearns in 3 rounds. In that first round of the Hagler-Hearns fight, it's safe to say that was the greatest first round in boxing history, if not the greatest round altogether. As soon as the opening bell rang, the 2 of them went at it nonstop.
Yeah.
Nonstop. In all due respect, if Don Majeski were here, he'd say Dempsey Firpo with the knockdowns. But for pure busyness, exchanging punches, Hagler Hearns, was legendary. And you mentioned Sugar Ray Leonard, Mac. 2 years later, he fought Leonard. It was a controversial decision. Some people like myself didn't feel it was that controversial, even though I admit it was a very close fight. You could make a case that Hagler won the fight, but Marvin was always bitter. He felt he was robbed because Leonard Mack was his nemesis, okay? His nemesis, kind of his rival. It was a fight that was in the making for a long time, but Leonard had an absence from the ring because he had a detached retina, but they finally got together. And by the time they got together, Leonard was thought to be past his peak, diminished, and most people were picking Hagler to knock Leonard out. And Leonard proved very resilient. It was a great fight, a close fight. Leonard won a split decision. There should have been a rematch, but Sugar Ray kind of was playing games rather than acting like a great champion and going into a rematch. He kept putting it off. Then 4 years later, they're at a boxing function, and Leonard asks Bob Arum to pass the word to Hagler. How about telling Marvin for us to do a rematch? We'll make a fortune of money. And at that point, Hagler was retired. He told Arum to tell Leonard, go get a life. You know, Hagler never fought again after that Leonard split decision loss.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Jack, I watched that first fight with Anafermo. I followed Hagler, and I mean, I've never seen a middleweight better in my lifetime. And of course, I'm not a historian like you are, but my God, that Thomas Hearns Hagler first round. I mean, Hagler, when the bell rang, was like still wanting to go at it. I mean, that first round was one of the most ferocious rounds I ever saw in my life. In any round, but that being a first round, it was like there was no bars held. I mean, it just went at it like two people that just hated each other. It was crazy.
Mac, Hagler always had a chip on his shoulder, and Bob Arum said it best. Marvin was fighting the fight when it was all over. The fight's over, and it was like he would be, you know, and I don't want to say confrontational with opponents, past opponents, because he could meet them at functions and he could be very friendly with them. But he had a hard time giving credit to opponents. Yeah. I mean, very hard. You know, he'd say, well, they did this and that, but I did it better. You know, like one of those. Like he had a chip on his shoulder because he came up the hard way. He had to fight, scratch, and claw for everything he had. So he never forgot from where he came from in a boxing sense. And even as a kid living in Newark was a tough place to live. He'd hear the gunfire when he was in his rooms, and he escaped all that to become a big success.
So Jack, I mean, like you said, he was a lunch pail guy. I mean, he was a boxer with power. I mean, you know, you don't see too many like that. You either got, the power guy or the boxer that kind of wears you down after so many rounds. But he was a mixture of both, and a southpaw, if I remember correctly.
Matt, exactly, Mac. And what's never mentioned about Marvin Hagler, too, he had a Jake LaMotta type chin. You talk about Jake LaMotta having a chin of iron. In 65 fights, Hagler was officially knocked down once, and it wasn't a real knockdown. He was pushed to the canvas. Yeah. No one can ever remember a fight with Marvin Hagler in which Hagler was hurt during the fight. You know, no one could ever remember him being staggered. Reportedly, even in the gym, he was knocked down one time in the gym. Wow. You know, that a fighter reportedly named Bobby Patterson just landed a punch on the chin and he went down. And that could happen to anyone. You know, a punch hits you, gets you off balance, knocks you off your feet. So he had a chin of iron and stamina. He would outlast opponents. I mean, there were no real weaknesses over there. The problem with the Leonard fight, where he lost a split decision, he sleptwalked the first half of the fight. Unlike the Hearns fight, he took his time, and before you knew it, he was a few rounds down. He got the better of it the second half of the fight against Leonard. But there's a such thing as digging yourself in a hole sometimes. You're a little complacent, a little lazy, and before you know it, you're behind and you have a lot of ground to make up. Some people feel he made the ground up. Some people feel he didn't. But Marvin was always bitter about the Leonard loss.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I mean, I would see Marvin just about every year, he'd come to Canastota, New York for the International Boxing Hall of Fame weekend. And even after Marvin was inducted, he bought a card that he stored there that during the parade could take him past the people. They have a phenomenal parade there. And Marvin loved that weekend because that was the, adulation he would get. Marvin had moved to Italy after that, leaving America where he'd make movies, and he was very popular there in Italy, but he'd like to come back to Canastota. But what struck me about Marvin, too, no one trained harder than Marvin Hagler when he fought. No one trained harder than him at all. I mean, you saw the physique on this guy and his energy level. He would say, I'm going to jail. That was what he meant for training camp. And even when he had one of his kids born, Marvin said to his trainer, their off day was Sunday, and it was during the week. He said, can we make today Sunday, and can we make Sunday the other day? Yeah. That was the most he conceded, like on one day to see the birth, of one of his children. But what struck me in Marvin after he retired, he kind of let go as far as the Spartan life, working out. Some boxers, athletes, they have to keep fit the whole time. They have to keep the training regimen. They'd have a race in Canastota, 5K, and Marvin would usually ride his bicycle during the race. And I felt it's odd. Why don't you run with the other runners, even though you're just jogging? Because other fighters like Mickey Ward, Marlon Starling, they would enter the race. They would they would jog at slow times, but they'd be on foot. But Marvin would like being on a bicycle. And I ran that race a good number of times. And I remember this was maybe about 6-7 years ago. I'm doing the 5K. It's spread out, and it's like about halfway during the race, and it's during an obscure place on the race course. I see one person there just watching the race on his bicycle, and it's Marvin Hagler, all alone, trying to encourage some people. And I thought that was a cool scene. He was just hanging out, spending a Sunday morning, keeping himself entertained. And can you imagine what the people are thinking or pass by? There's Marvin Hagler, like all alone out of nowhere, like what?
So, I can imagine. You personally know Vito Interfermo.
Yeah, very well. Yeah.
You sparred with him, you covered him, you talked to him.
You were friends, yeah.
Yeah. So how did he feel after did he ever talk to you about that fight with Marvin?
Oh, he did. Oh, we talked about it a number of times in private. Vito, of course, feels he won the fight, but he understands that there are people who feel Hagler won the fight. And, Vito actually liked Marvin. And I think Marvin liked Vito. Too. Like I asked him, and he's cool, and I could tell there was a respect there when they'd see one another in Canastota. And listen, had I told Vito, Marvin, there's a problem with him, he needs you there, it would help him out a lot. Vito would be there for Marvin. And my impression always would be Marvin would be there for Vito. I got the feeling there was a real brotherhood there. And that's despite their second fight that people forget about, that Sports Illustrated wrote about. Marvin stopped Vito in 4 rounds on cuts. And Marvin kept butting Vito that fight. I'm not saying it's intentional, even though Vito would tell you it was. But Sports Illustrated wrote about the rematch, a funny headline, no ifs, ands, but some buts.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But Vito was a little past his peak the second time around, and Marvin was in his prime. And I think there's a brotherhood when two guys go at it like that in the ring. They have a certain bond that they forever going to share, by what they experience with one another. But, Vito liked Marvin, and he thought he was a, great fighter, and he thought it was a great fight. Yeah. And if you get Vito quietly, he'll tell you, it could have gone either way. He'll say, I think I won, but it could have gone either way. I could understand people saying that Marvin won. Vito didn't let his ego get too far in the way, but fighters are great liars, Mac. You have to understand. They can rarely admit someone is better than them. Any somewhat close fight, they're always going to say that, oh, I think I won the fight. They're always going to say it.
I would imagine you'd have to have that mindset just to get in the ring and be a true champion anyway, Jack. You would have to think that you're the best no matter who you go up against.
You have to have excuses when you lose, Mac, because otherwise you're saying the other guy's better than you.
Right.
And if you say no excuses, he was just better than me, you may as well retire.
Right.
The guy, Cervino, I mean, they're all fighters. Listen, Marvin lost 3 fights in his career. He lost the Leonard fight. That really made him bitter. Very, very bitter. He claims he was robbed. He wasn't robbed. If you think Hagler won the fight, that's not an unfair opinion to give. But to say he was robbed, that's ludicrous. He wasn't, people use the term robbed too loosely. Just say you think Hagler won the fight if you support him and leave it at that. And then there were 2 other fights he lost early in his career in Philadelphia. One of them to Bobby Boogaloo Watts. Russell Peltz, I think, talked about it on the show, was a terrible decision from all accounts. And then the other one, he fought a fighter, Willie the Worm Monroe, who legitimately beat Hagler, according to reports, legitimately. But Hagler was on the way up and wasn't the Marvin Hagler he would later become.
Excellent commentary, Jack. I knew you. That's why I gave you the floor. I knew you would be able to put a lot of nuggets in there that some people don't even know, and that's why I turned it to you and your expertise and your coverage. Folks, in about 10 minutes, we'll be having on 2-time Super Bowl champion Jim Jeffcoat is due to come on with Dallas Cowboy defensive end. The stats put him amongst, if not better than, some of the Dallas Cowboy great defensive linemen in history. And we'll be, hopefully, if he makes it in, we'll be talking to him, Jack, which will be very exciting. As I said, this is This Week in Sports, folks. So there are topics that we want to get to that happened, and we'll be doing that with our guests. But this one, Jack, is a topic that is somewhat controversial, so we'll just skim over it. And it's about the transgender men that are going to become women, I should say transgender women, competing with biological women. And this story is so big that my other job, Jack, that I also work, they were talking about it, and it made headlines. And what happened is that a lot of the female students, high school and college, started filing lawsuits about this happening, that the transgender women were breaking records, were qualifying for scholarships, and were competing against them. And biologically, it's unfair. So one of the groups that's been discriminated against a long time, the women, is now being challenged by a smaller group, the transgender women, who are now trying to find their own niche. You know what I'm saying? So these biological men probably can't compete with the other men. In other words, for example, Serena Williams, if Roger Federer became a transgender female, he would have, as great as Serena Williams is, an unfair advantage playing Serena Williams. He's biologically a man, and I don't think Serena Williams could beat him. So some states are banning this, Jack, and the transgender people, the organizations, are kind of firing back. So it's a big story. It could be a little controversial. To me, there's no controversy, but to some there will be, where some will say, well, they should train harder, and that's just ridiculous. But it's kind of a delicate situation if I'm saying it right. But to me, there's only one right answer, Jack.
Yeah, you're explaining it right. I mean, the way to prove things is in the courts. Let's see the science. I mean, if the science can show us, which I doubt that it can, but if it can show us there are no physical advantages that a transgender athlete has, then the playing field has to be, the switch over has to be allowed. It has to be allowed, all competition. There can't be any restrictions. But it's the type of topic I don't feel comfortable talking about, Matt, quite honestly. And the reason I don't is because of the type of sensitive society that we're in today. you want equal rights for people. You don't want people to be discriminated against in any way, shape, or form. And to tell a group that they're not allowed to compete when they've switched over, okay?
Right.
It's not an easy thing to do, to tell them they're not allowed to compete, but also it's not an easy thing to tell women who feel that they're now at an unfair advantage because of transgender athletes, to just let it go, allow it, and watch records get broken. That's not an easy thing to do either. The courts are going to settle this. I think this is a story that's going to pick up steam as we go along.
I definitely agree with Jack. There's more to come when it comes to that. We're going to talk about the when Robert comes on and Anthony about the, we thought that there was going to be a lot of quarterback movement, Jack, but the opposite has happened, right? Dak Prescott gets signed to a huge contract. Big Ben almost has to beg the Steelers to take him back. And Cam Newton, out of nowhere, people did not expect this, Jack. Cam Newton gets signed to a 1-year, $14 million contract.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. Listen, Dak Prescott, we knew, let's take it individually. We knew there was a good chance he was coming back to the Cowboys. Let's be honest about it. The odds favored him coming back. We thought there's a chance he might not, but we thought in all probability he would. Ben Roethlisberger put the Steel organization in a very sticky situation. They did make the playoffs with him as the quarterback. But listen, Ben is basically on his last legs, okay? Can he still be productive next year? Yes, he can. But the Steelers, for the first time in many a year, are going to have to address their quarterback situation. So they worked out a deal with Ben where he took a cut, that's something he could feel comfortable with. The Steelers could feel comfortable with to come back for another year. Maybe Ben Roethlisberger has a very good year this year and he continues for another year. His situation's similar to Eli Manning's with the Giants. But, the Steel organization is looking for an exit plan where they don't want to embarrass one of their iconic players, okay? They're not just gonna cut Ben Roethlisberger, say you're a cap casualty. That would be a little too cold to do. So they're working things out. So I'm not shocked he came back because Ben worked it out with them with the salary. Cam Newton, that was a stunner. That was an absolute stunner. And the reason it's a stunner is because, they are paying him decent money to come back, but not as one of the top quarterbacks, not on that pay scale. But the Patriots might still draft a quarterback. They might get someone else as a quarterback. And Cam Newton's base salary isn't that high. It's tied into incentives as well, meaning if he plays as much as he did last year, he's not going to do bad for himself. And people are surprised. I'll still be a little surprised if Cam Newton's the starting quarterback for New England, despite the deal that they worked out with him. But Cam Newton, I'm going to tell you something. I think he was abused in a way at Carolina when he played for the Panthers. He had a number of concussions. He took a lot of beatings. He hung in there. And I don't like the way they exited with Cam Newton. I don't feel he was truly appreciated. And this is a guy, Cam Newton, that was a former league MVP. He took a team to a 15-1 record and then to the Super Bowl. He showed he could get it done. And he holds the NFL record for touchdowns scored. Okay? And he's a potential Hall of Famer, Cam Newton. On the fringes of getting there, perhaps. So, yeah, but it was a surprise.
So, folks, backstage right now, and Jim, I know you can hear me. We can't hear you because I have you backstage. Your video isn't hooked up. So if you can put on the cam button down at the bottom, I don't know if you can or not. We're going to bring you up anyway because we'll be able to hear you. So, folks, we have backstage coming up, 2-time Super Bowl champion Jim Jeffcoat, who was 2-time Super Bowl champion with the Dallas Cowboys, 93 and 94. He replaced the great Harvey Martin. When he retired from the Cowboys or left the Cowboys to play in Buffalo, he was the all-time franchise leader in sacks. He's a member of the 102 Sacks Club, and to me, is somebody that should be considered for the Hall of Fame. So let's bring up my nemesis as a Giant fan. He drove me crazy, the great Jim Jeffcoat. How are you doing today, Jim?
I'm doing well. It's a little early here. A little early.
I imagine you're in Texas right now, right, Jim?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Is there any way that you can bring up the video you have there, Jim? Okay.
Sure.
Let's see if we can get you. Oh, there he is.
I just had to. I had just finished working out, and I had took a shower and everything, so I was just making sure I was on time.
Yes, sir. Well, you know, Jim. I don't think you need to work out, my friend. You're still a monster. I'll tell you. So what I want to go over with you, Jim, if we could, I want to start in the beginning. You're from New Jersey. You're New Jersey guy,
from the Jersey Shore,
right? And you ended up going to, I think it was Arizona State, if I'm correct, in college.
Yes, that is correct.
And of course, you were a first-round draft pick of the Dallas Cowboys.
Yes,
and you had an immediate impact. And why I say you're my nemesis is because at that time, the Giants, when you first came up, they ended up being a Super Bowl team. But man, that defensive line you were part of, especially in the later years, they talk about Michael Irvin, they talk about Troy Aikman, they talk about Emmitt Smith, they talk about that offensive line. But that defensive line that you were a member of was unbelievable, Jim. I mean, you guys had so much talent, and I felt led by you. Let me take that off so we can see you. Led by you, in my opinion, anyway. I mean, you guys just came at people in waves, part of that defensive line.
And that is very true. I actually played with two great lines. Obviously, I played with Ed Jones, Randy White, Harvey Martin for a year, John Dutton, and those guys. And then the second wave was a little unique from the standpoint is that when we rotated, the experience didn't go down. I mean, we had depth on that second group of lines. Charles Haley, obviously, Tony Tolbert, Russell Maryland, Tony Casillas, Jimmy Jones. I mean, you can go on. That was a very deep and talented line.
So when you ended your career, of course, they didn't count sacks per part of your career. So they.
Oh no, they did. I had all sacks for all my career.
Oh, did you? I thought when you first come up,
I came in 1983.
Okay.
And they started counting sacks in 1982.
Right. Okay. So I know from what I have here, you had 149 quarterback pressures. You had 94.5 sacks, 698 tackles, Jim. And you know, I as a Giant fan, I go all the way back to Fran Tarkenton and when Dallas Cowboys, when Tom Landry, our defensive coordinator, went and left, and they had some of the most ferocious defenses. I mean, you had the Doomsday defense,
Yes.
Bob Lee, Jethro Pugh, and then it came Harvey Martin and Too Tall Jones and Randy White, and then came you, my friend. And I'll never forget that tip pass that you returned for a touchdown against Phil Simms. And I remember watching you run down the sideline, hoping somebody could catch you and tackle you.
It was nice I had to do it twice.
That is true. And I thought, well, maybe nobody wants to tackle that big guy running down the sideline. You know, you were. What was remarkable to me about you, and I have utmost respect for the game of football. I played and I coached also. I know you've been a coach and you might presently still be coaching. I have a great respect for the game of football, and anybody that can play at the level that you do in the pros, I have a lot of respect for. And you're welcome. And can you take us back to the lean years when you first started with the Cowboys. They had some, and they made that big trade with Herschel Walker and sprung you guys back to the Super Bowl. The lean years. What was the feeling like there when you guys weren't on top?
It was frustrating because the way Coach Landry, Chuck Schramm, Gil Brandt have built the organization, you had expectations, and that was the thing. And we were aging, but they had before myself. There are a lot of first rounders that didn't pan out, and that was unfortunate, and that was tough because when you became a Cowboy, you had the expectations were probably a little higher because they had so much success and they had built that the program to a certain level, so you were expected to play at that level, and that's what the frustration was. And they were lean years. I went through the lean years, and it was tough. It was tough. It shows you that because when you become a Dallas Cowboys, you expect to be in 2 or 3 Super Bowls in your first 5 years, and that didn't happen. Yeah, and that was the thing, and that was the unfortunate thing. But looking back, I appreciate it more now because of the success I had later in my career.
That's
Now, Jim, you mentioned the draft. When you were drafted, it wasn't a spectacle it is today. It became later on. I mean, later on, it became a whole big thing. I recall in the mid-'80s going to one of the drafts, and it was in a little hotel, okay?
Yes,
and there weren't
in New
many
York,
people
in
there.
New York City.
It was very homely, a small gathering, a couple of hundred people, no TV, anything, and held in a mid-afternoon. People could drop in during their lunchtime, like I kind of did when I was in the city in Manhattan.
Yeah,
And
because I
later,
remember that. Yes.
right. Do you wish you were drafted a little later? Radio City Music Hall and had all the pomp and circumstance.
Not really, because I had the opportunity. I had friends that actually he was a former NBA rep. He was Tommy Nunez, and that's where we watched the draft. At myself and friends watched it over his house. His daughter and myself went to school. We went to Arizona State together, and it was really nice having friends to be around and watch the draft. Now, like you said, it's a spectacle.
Did you get a call before your number was called to know the Cowboys were drafting you, or did you just hear it on TV or whatever?
I got a call a week before. Gil Brandt called me a week before the draft and told me they were going to draft me. And then the day of the draft, Al Davis calls me and tells me, "Are you going to be there because we're going to draft you in the first round?" And so I knew I was going to go in the first round. I just didn't know where. The Cowboys, I didn't know. Gil had told in a mock draft he had picked me a week before the draft. And he told me, because I hung up on him because back then we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have caller ID. I thought somebody was playing a joke on me because,
right.
Like you said, I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up on the Jersey Shore, and my high school defensive coordinator told me one day that I'd be a Dallas Cowboys, and I said, "You're out of your mind. I'd never be a Cowboy." And it happened, and he was the first one to call me and said, "I told you."
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So
that's pretty cool. So Tom Landry gets let go while you're there. What were your feelings about that, Jim? I mean, new owner, Tom Landry, a legend, one of the greatest defensive minds in football history. He gets let go of kind of unceremoniously. Did that bother you at all when he was let go that way?
Well, it's unfortunate, but as we all know, professional sports is a business, and it's about production, and it's about making sure that you get things done. And unfortunately, at that point, we were struggling.
Right.
We were struggling, and that's not anything. And you're right. I thought that Coach Landry walked on water, and when he come in, the choirs would sing, and there'd be a little glow when he walked into a meeting. But that's just the unfortunate part of being involved in sports in the professional ranks, is that you're going to have those things happen. And the one thing that I can always say is Jimmy brought energy. I mean, it was incredible energy that he brought to the Cowboys. And Jerry brought the energy too, because he put everything he had into purchasing the Cowboys, and you have to appreciate that. And it's you can never say anything. Coach Landry is, and deservedly so, one of the greatest coaches that ever coached. But at some point, we all have to move on, and it might have been his time.
So there had to be almost a total opposite demeanor from Coach Landry. I don't know how he was personally with you guys, and Jimmy Johnson, as you said, bringing all that energy. Was Coach Landry a funny guy personally, or was he very businesslike?
He was very businesslike. He was a little bit aloof at certain things, and it was he really didn't sit down. Jimmy, you go in his office, and we sit down and just talk about everything, fish and life and things of that nature. Where Coach Landry, you never had that one-on-one relationship, and that's nothing. And that he's had success,
right?
But
you played in 224 consecutive games. That's like 14 years in a row. Not missing a game thereabouts. Are you kidding me? That many consecutive games? How did you manage that? How did you manage to stay healthy and productive at the same time?
Well, my dad just got up every morning and went to work, whether he was sick, if he had sore or anything. So I learned from him the toughness and the dedication. When you want to do something, you find a way to get it done.
So as you replace Harvey Martin and Too Tall Jones, I'm not sure if did you play with Randy White also, Jim?
Yes, I played with Ed. Actually, I played opposite of Ed until 1989.
Right.
And my first year, I was Harvey's backup, Harvey Martin, and then I played with Randy White until 1989 too.
Did you learn a lot from these guys, Jeff?
Yes, I did. They would Ernie Staudtner, who is a Pro Football Hall of Fame, was my coach, and I worshiped the ground Ernie walked in. He taught me how to be a pro, and he basically put me under their wings, and they took it and they ran with it. What they said went. And that was it. And I learned a lot from him. Randy would spend hours in the film room with me. And back then we had 8mm, so you could hear that click, 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 click. And we'd sit there and watch film. And Ed would teach me the little nuances of how to be a defensive end and how to play the flex, because I had to learn quick. It usually takes you 3 or 4 years to learn how to play it. And Ed taught me how to play it within a year. And that was unique, is that the first year that I started, during preseason, I didn't miss I did every snap of preseason, and I did every snap of the season. And that was unique at that period of time.
You were a pretty good wrestler in high school, correct?
Yes.
Did that help you? This might be a silly question. Did that help you in the NFL, through college into the NFL? Your wrestling background, did it give you like a tiny edge?
No question, because I was undersized as a wrestler. I weighed 205, and I wrestled guys that are usually 25 to 40 pounds bigger than I was, because I was in Unlimited. But it was unique. A great story about that. When I was a sophomore, the first varsity match I had was against Sam Mills, who was the reigning state champion.
Wow.
I gave him a great battle. I gave him a great battle for about 5 seconds.
Talk about it.
One of the other teammates, Ed Too Tall Jones, took up boxing. I'm a former president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. And Too Tall, as strong as he was as a football player, he couldn't punch as a boxer. He really didn't have that much power for whatever reason. Did you go? I heard the Cowboy team went to his fights. Were you one of the people who went to one of the teammates who went to his fights?
No, well, I didn't, because I wasn't in the NFL, but I was still in college.
Oh, okay.
Because like I said, I played with him a majority of my career, and I didn't get the opportunity. But I remember asking him about it, and he said, "Hey, I retired undefeated. That's all I know."
Fixing up.
That's great. That's great. So, Jim, in 1984, you get 11.5 sacks. 85, you get 12 sacks. You sacked Joe Theismann 5 times. I think that's still. I think you tied a record with that one. I mean, you brought it to all the NFC East quarterbacks. I mean, like I said, I remember the interception off Sims, and I think you had Joe Theismann a little scared at the end of that game. I swear to God. I swear to God, Joe.
Well,
so, go ahead.
I relive that a lot because one of my partners in the business that I am in is a Redskins fan, or excuse me, I have to be politically correct, Washington football team fan.
Right.
And he reminds me, and he tells me, "Yeah, you had 5 sacks against our guys." He said, "I couldn't stand you," and I said, "Well, it was just it was business. It's never personal." And then I always told him it was business. And
Jim, you had I'm sorry. You had a son that formerly played for the Redskins, the Washington football team, correct?
Yes.
Now, who did you root for? The Cowboys or the Washington?
Well, here's you got to think, Jack, is that I really enjoyed my time at the Cowboys, but blood is thicker than water. I'm always going to root for my son. My father was a huge Green Bay Packers fan because he always told me Lombardi was the only real coach. So, but I brought him to. I knew he was a big Packers fan, so I brought him to a playoff game when we were playing the Packers. And I asked him the same question. I said, "Well, I play for the Cowboys, but I know the Packers are your team. Who are you going to root for?" And I said, "Dad," he looked me straight in the eyes. He said, "I'm always going to root for my son, but go Pack, go."
He wanted you to do well, but he still wanted the Packers to win.
That's right.
That's awesome. So, again, you have the record right now, Jim, or you did have the record when you left, I should say, of the most sacks by a Dallas Cowboy. Was it your moves, Jim, or was it just strength, a mixture of both? Well, say for instance, what was your favorite move? Was it to get low, come around, the swim move? I mean, I'm into all that stuff, dude. Like I said, I coached for a long time. What was your
speed to power?
Right.
Speed to power. I get guys off balance. I am a black belt in Taekwondo. I'm a first-degree black belt, and I worked all these techniques, hands, and then I worked on boxing. I never wanted to go in the ring, but I would take. I had a trainer who would train me in boxing because I wanted to get hand speed and utilize my hand. So I used speed to power, and I would get the guy would shoot his hands, and I could take him off of me, and then just run by him or run him over. If he got too high, I go inside. If he didn't get high enough, I go outside, or I use what they call long arm, and I coach that. So those things I had, but my favorite one was what Leon Lett called the bucket. When I get a guy and I just basically just run him over with a
headbutt. So I feel that, and this is my personal opinion, and not because you're on the show. I think that you are definitely, and I don't know why your name hasn't come up yet, a person that should be in the mix, at least to get on the Hall of Fame ballot. I mean, with all the records you have, the Cowboys that are already in the Hall of Fame, I think that your name should be brought up. Does it bother athletes that they're not, considered, Jim?
Well, I've been nominated before, but it does bother me but it is, as you go on, you realize that it's not a perfect science on how they do it. Because I look back and obviously I look and see that guys that I competed with, I have better stats than they do, but that's just I don't have any control over it, so I never worry about it. Eventually, I think it'll happen.
Me too.
Well, hopefully, I'll be able to do it. Hopefully, I'll be able to give a speech. And I've been to the Super Bowl the Super Bowl. I've been to the Hall of Fame, and I watched Michael inducted. I'll definitely go see Jimmy inducted. So.
At least a Ring of Honor. How about that? How about
I think I know that's going to happen. At some point, he's going to put me in the Ring of Honor.
You know, one thing I found a little fascinating after being on the two Cowboys Super Bowl winning teams, you went to the Buffalo Bills, the team the Cowboys beat. Like you joined the enemy in a sense. I mean, were you looked at a little bit as being the enemy? Was there a little bit carryover? I'm sure the guys adopted you very quickly on the Bills. But what was the mindset? You go to the team that your team beat twice in a row in the Super Bowl.
It was fascinating from the standpoint is that Jim Kelly was obviously the quarterback at that time, and he welcomed me with open arms. Bruce Smith, Andre Reed, Thurman Thomas, Kent Hull, and became real good friends with. It was interesting. It was like we had been teammates for years, and I never brought my rings out though. I never. But I enjoyed that time because that was a unique group. Because I don't know, they talk about all the things, and rightfully so, but there's never been a team to do what Buffalo's done in those 4 years. That is pretty impressive. How hard it is to get to one Super Bowl and to get to 4 in a row. That's impressive.
When you beat them that second Super Bowl, I could never figure it out because when you were with the Cowboys, when I say you were down 13-6 at the half, and Buffalo's body language with a 7-point lead halftime seems so poor to me. Jim Kelly was the only one that looked to be running off enthusiastic, and as soon as Thurman Thomas fumbled, and your team, the Cowboys, took it in for a touchdown quickly and tied it up. It's like Buffalo knew they were going to lose. It's like it didn't make sense to me. A great team like that with their personnel didn't have a little more fight in the Super Bowl. They were too good a team to lose the way they did both those Super Bowls to the Cowboys.
Well, Jack, you got to realize that Jimmy built a unique team. He really did, in the sense that he put a different kind of mindset. When we walked on the field, and this will shock you, Buffalo was more talented than the Cowboys teams, but we had the mindset that when we walked on the field, we were the best, and we were going to play like the best. It didn't matter. At halftime of that game, you make a good point. Most coaches would be screaming and hollering. Jimmy just walked in there and said, okay. He said, let's go win this game. That's all he said. And we went and won it. That was just the way it was. I mean, we had that mindset. We were a different group. Our practices were normally harder than the games because we had that person that was so competitive. You didn't want to get beat because you didn't want to go in the film room and watch yourself getting beat by a teammate. So even the week before the Super Bowl, we normally had our best practices.
Yeah. So today's Cowboys, Jim, they just signed Dak Prescott to that huge contract. They seem like they have the talent for the last few years to take it to that next level, to take it to the Super Bowl. And a lot of people are thinking maybe the defense right now is what's kind of has been the soft part of the Dallas Cowboys. What are your opinions on Dallas, what they've got to do to take it to that next step? They sure look like on paper they got the talent.
Well, they do. They have a very explosive offense with Zeke and Dad and everything, Amari and the other receivers. But like you said, the defense has got to improve. And here's a unique thing is that we were number one defense in the NFL those years. But just like the Cowboys now, their offense was getting already notoriety, but we played hard. We played hard. And that was my concern at the beginning of last year. They didn't play hard. They didn't. And that's the thing on defense. It's not usually always about having the best talent. It's the teams that execute the best and who play hard. Because that's the thing in the NFL. You get so many things thrown at you that you have to be able to step up the challenges. You got to compete with yourselves. Like I said, and I'll go back to our practices against that offense, we dominated them because we come after them, and that made us better. And that's what the defense is. I know the league is changing. You can't do some of the things that we did at that time. Yeah. But the defense has got to compete. And I think Dan Quinn, I know Dan, and I think he'll help them. And George Edwards being the senior, I worked with him at the Cowboys. and the senior assistant, and he was the defensive coordinator at Minnesota. I think they'll figure it out and help the Cowboys. I don't know if they're Super Bowl contenders right now, but they should have an opportunity to compete in the NFC East and play and be a playoff team.
How would you have adjusted under today's rules? I mean, putting your arms around the quarterback, you'd have to put him down very gently, you know, especially with your wrestling background. You wouldn't be allowed to throw him down. You'd have to handle him with care. How would you have adjusted?
In a nice and kind way, that I would struggle. I would
Yes.
struggle. I couldn't do it. I would probably be fined every week for the hits.
You know, Jim. Everybody said offense is taking over the league and defense doesn't win championships anymore. But we found out this Super Bowl that it still does. That the Tampa Bay defense shut down one of the most potent offenses in the league. And
Yes.
as I've told everybody, I don't care how great the offense gets, and unless you stop the defenses from tackling, defense is always going to be the one that stops the other team from scoring. And if you stop the other team from scoring, you're going to win. And
Exactly.
Tampa Bay showed everybody that defense is still the most important thing on a football team.
What I learned in coaching, being a coach, is that, and you make a great point on Tampa Bay, is when you want to be successful as a defensive on a defense, you got to limit possessions on offense. That doesn't mean that you're going to do that. You're going to all the time. But if you can limit the possession, say they normally have 12 possessions a game. If you limit their times they can get the ball to maybe 9, you got a really good chance your percentages go up and winning. And you're right. And that's what Tampa did. They limited the possession. Kansas City wasn't used to getting a lot of 3 and outs.
Right.
And they did that. They got probably more 3 and outs than Kansas City has had in the last 2 years. Andy Reid is a tremendous coach. But you got to give Todd Bowles and Tampa Bay defensive staff, because they really studied him and they understood how to attack you.
Excellent. Hey, Jim, before we let you go, I want you to talk a little bit about what you're doing right now. I've read where you're coaching. I know you were part of the XFL. I don't know if you're still involved in that or not. But tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now, Jim.
As of now, I'm a partner in a major medical and benefits company, and we help small businesses have affordable health care, and we do things of that, and we give them supplemental benefits, meaning that we help them with what their insurance policies don't pay. We have avenues that we can direct them to make sure that they get everything taken care of. So I do that now. I have coached in the XFL, the AAF, college, NFL, and all those things, but I enjoy this because I'm helping people.
Well, Jim, off air, send us that information. Send my producer that. We'll put it up. We'll put it up on our sites and give you a little bit of a pub on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And Jim, too, just very quickly, I joke with Mac on the air about the XFL. In order for them, The Rock took over, for them to make it. Maybe have The Rock, a Stone Cold Steve Austin, come in halftime for ratings and, give the coach a stunner. They wouldn't want to mess with you if you were the head coach.
No, because I body slammed both of them.
I know that.
Oh, my God. Hey, Jim, we really appreciate you coming in. We know all the viewers and listeners appreciate it. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to come and spend it with us. Have a great Sunday and keep up the great work you're doing there.
Thank you. You guys have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Right.
Thank you again, Jim. So there you go, folks. The great Jim Jeffcoat. In my opinion, Jack, a Hall of Famer, will be there. He will get in the Ring of Honor. I mean, he has stats that match up against any great Dallas Cowboys.
Well, I'd like to see him in the Ring of Honor already. Apparently, I didn't ask him that. Maybe Jerry Jones told him, you're going to get in. Hold on, you're going to get in soon. It seems like that day's coming soon. And it's a big thing in Dallas to get in the Ring of Honor.
Oh,
and and he's someone to take a serious look at as far as the Hall of Fame.
I agree. So the great Jim Jeffcoat. We got, after this break, folks, we got one of our best guests, a great broadcaster up. He's on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. It's Robert Butler from Skope. So, guys, stick around with us. We got a lot of stuff going on today, Jack. A lot of great guests. So stick with us, folks. We'll be right back with Robert Butler, the host of Sports Skope.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
Hi, Grandma. What's for dinner?
Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
Ooh, can Nina come over?
I'm not sure about our new friend. I wonder if there's been any drinking going on. Alcohol at her age can lead to so many bad things. I've been meaning to ask you, what would happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say no. I have too much respect for my family, and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma.
I love you too. Okay, how about tasting the stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
When you hear the word asthma, you probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. Experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211 Infoline. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, keeping Connecticut healthy.
If you talk and they will hear you every single time.
Oh, we're getting killed. Yeah, well, Kyle's not here. How come? You don't think. Didn't Tim tell you? Kyle and some other kids got caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah. Zero tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's a first offense, right?
That we know of. Why should that matter? He knew not to drink. I made it clear to Matt, that's what we expect from him. What have you said to Tim?
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids try it at this age, so.
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I'm not saying that Matt's going to be this perfect kid, but if I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't, how's he going to know?
You think kids that age really listen?
They never admit it, though, but they hear more than you think.
Talk. They hear you. For more information about talking with kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show. We're live Wednesdays through Sunday, 8 to 10 a.m. Today is our This Week in Sports special. We're running until football picks up again and is in full swing. I'm your host, Mac, with your co-host, the legendary boxing writer, Hall of Fame nominee in boxing. Well, Jack doesn't like to talk about it, but he is. He's going to be inducting, as a fact, into the Hall of Fame here in New York. And, Jack, we just had on a very special guest, Jeffcoat, two-time Super Bowl champion of the Dallas Cowboys.
Mac, I mentioned at the end, I know you were wrapped up the interview and you did a great job, but I couldn't help myself but to, when you said the XFL, to mention my wrestling thought with Stone Cold Rock halftime, because Jim Jeffcoat had a wrestling background, so notice how he enjoyed that. Say, oh no, I body slam him. And he would have, and you get the feeling he would have loved it if they came in with his team and barged in at halftime The Rock is stone cold. He would have been up to the task. He's one coach they wouldn't have pushed around.
Not at all. 6'5" and 280 in the NFL, and he looks bigger than that now, Jack. So let's bring up one of our favorite guests, Robert Butler, host of Sports Skope. He does an incredible job there. If you get a chance, go check out his show. You can see it at his site, or you can see it on the Northeast Streaming Sports YouTube channel and the Facebook. So let's bring up Robert.
Hey, morning, guys.
How you doing?
I'm always happy to see Rob. I'm always happy to see you each Sunday, and I'm happy to see you now. Don't misunderstand me, but this is a little bit of a letdown. You're following a two-time Super Bowl champion. I can't get excited seeing. I enjoy seeing you, though.
Nah, he's biased for the players, man. You need,
by the time we're
you
done talking, I'll be enlightened, and I'm going to, enjoy the time together. But I'm still on a high. You can understand that, right?
Yeah, he's a good guest, two-time Super Bowl winner. I was looking him up as we were talking. You guys were doing that interview. Yeah.
It was great talking with him. But I enjoy talking to you every week, Robert.
I do too. I'm just still exhilarated now, Robert Butler. I needed a few more minutes to, get my
come down to reality. Yeah.
Yes.
Back to life, back to reality, like the song. That was a great song in the 90s.
Yes, it was.
Long career he had. 12 years with the Cowboys, then 3 with the Buffalo Bills.
Never injured, never played every game. That's incredible. So, Robert, getting on to the topics we got today, we expected there were so many quarterbacks eligible to go free agency. We had the quarterbacks that we knew contracts came up. There were quarterbacks complaining about their situation, and so far, nothing. I mean, we got 3 quarterbacks that were basically re-signed, right? We have Dak finally got his contract. We got Big Ben, who practically begged the Steelers to take him back for one more year.
Yeah.
And then you got the big shock of all, Cam Newton gets re-signed by the Patriots for 1 year, $14 million. I think it's 6 base. If he makes it to the playoffs, it jumps up to 14. So it's still a $14 million cap against their $69 million cap they had. What do you make of these 3 moves?
Yeah, I looked that up technically, like according to Spot Track or Spol Track, however people pronounce it different ways. It's really good at getting at these contracts. Technically, the cap hit is $5 million for Cam, and it's about 8.5 in incentives, whether they get to the playoffs, whether it's a stat incentive, which really don't count against the cap if you hit those incentives. And he's okay with it. I could see he's probably a get out of jail free card if they don't make a Jimmy Garoppolo trade, or if they don't. I expect them to either bring in somebody else or draft somebody else, whether it be a rookie or a other veteran quarterback. But that being said, they were 8-8 with Cam. He did have a lot of rushing
7-9. It's actually 7-9.
7-9. Was it 7-9?
Yes,
okay.
7-9. Yeah.
And they were 2 or 3 plays away from possibly being 10-6. If you look at the Seattle game and the first Buffalo game, so it's not as bad as it looks on the outside. Look at all the players that opted out. They had no skill position players. Julian Edelman got hurt. They're going to be able to bring in some more tight ends, maybe a Hunter Henry, Tyler Eifert, somebody like that. A lot of free agent wide receiver, and I would recommend in their case, since they can't draft them right, get some free agent wide receivers to help him out with the defense. I mean, I could see them possibly – they're a wild card team if the season if everything fell in place right now, before the draft, I would put them as a potential wild card team. I don't think they're better than Buffalo yet, but I think they're a wild card team.
I don't think they're better than Miami either. Don't you think?
Well, above Miami, yeah.
Yeah. Don't you think, though, okay, I understand he had no weapons, that their defense, they had a lot of people opted out, and that, yeah, they were a couple plays away from beating a couple teams. But his shoulder, he's not accurate anymore, Robert. He's not like he was. That shoulder injury that he suffered with the Carolina Panthers, amongst a lot of injuries he's taken, I mean, it seems like his arm is not there, that he can't put the ball in the area. And that's what is upsetting, not me, because I'm not a Patriot fan, but it's upsetting a lot of Patriots to to give him this amount of money when they could have maybe gone out and got, say, an Andy Dalton. They could have went maybe and got Mitch Trubisky, or maybe went out and got Alex Smith was just let go. He's a lot more accurate than Cam Newton. I know Cam Newton can run with the ball, but I mean, that's not going to win you games if that's the only threat you have. So in my mind, I think it's crazy. The Patriots, like I said, a lot of Patriot fans are upset, and I don't blame them, Robert.
Yeah. Well, they did split with Miami last year, so they may still be better than Miami. So, I mean, you got to look at the actual scores of these games and watch these games. They're very close. Remember, they were close with Kansas City. Yeah. This team, I thought they were going to be top 5 pick last year with all the opt-outs and no training camp. You had COVID. I mean, and he got COVID last year. Remember that?
True.
Guys, I think
pretty hard on people.
I think we're jumping the gun on this. If you look at the contract cap, as Rob pointed out, it's, I think, a $5 million base salary, and that's backup money. That's not starting money. They could bring in another quarterback, and it's my feeling that's their intention, and I don't know what direction they're going to go into, but I don't think they have it in their head, the Patriots, that Cam Newton's going to be their starter. They think if worst-case scenario, it's a second year with them, he can handle it if they have to plug him in, but I don't think by any stretch of the imagination, the Patriots are thinking right now, okay, Cam's our starter, case closed. And keep this in mind, it wasn't a two-way street, this particular deal. Cam had no other real options. No other NFL team was going to take him on as a starter. So you may as well stay with New England where he might possibly start. And worst case scenario, he's a backup with New England, and he probably feels more comfortable backing up at New England now than he would somewhere else.
Yeah, it just feels like a safe bet. Hey, they could cut him in training camp. Maybe that shoulder re-aggravates, and it's a little bit of dead money. Cam's made over $100 million. He told that kid that was giving him a hard way to go. Remember, I am still rich, kid.
Yeah, very true. What do you think about now? Jack has a theory there, and I think he's right. I think Ben Roethlisberger put the Steelers in a very difficult position. He's an icon there. He's a Super Bowl winner. Yeah, I guarantee you, he holds a lot of records there. And he was practically, out publicly telling the Steelers he'll do anything to come back. What could the Steelers do? I mean, say no to a guy that has brought them, so many Super Bowls.
That is true. I mean, I looked at his number also on the cap. He's $25 million cap hit. That's not too bad, but Tom Brady is $9 million on the cap hit for Tampa when his restructure. So I wish he would actually restructured more and get that below $10 million. He's lost his center. They lost their left tackle, Villanueva. That's a mouthful, that name. But you've got 2 offensive linemen. You've got a guy in his late 30s. They're going to use Smith-Schuster, which is fine. I would have let him walk as well. But they need more money to solidify that offensive line. He's not the athlete he used to be, and I kind of wish he would have went down a little bit farther. They'll be competitive, but that division is going to be a lot harder with Joe Burrow coming back. With all those draft picks, I expect them to shore up their offensive line in Cincinnati. You still got Baltimore, and Cleveland still looks to be pretty strong this year. That's going to be a very hard division. There's no more easy outs no more. The Cleveland thing is over with now. Yeah. As far as them being an easy, right 2 wins on your if you're a Steelers fan.
A big story comes out with the NCAA voting to pay the players for their likeness, use of names. This is an organization that would fine and maybe even suspend over stupid things like a friend buying you a sandwich and or even a relative. This came because certain players, of course, they were suing and the government was going to take action. I think the NCAA was forced into this. Do you think that goes far enough, Robert?
Well, I just think it's long overdue. These players should be, you work your whole, a friend of mine, she takes her son to all these camps for baseball. flying him for accounts that are out of state and everything. Parents give a lot of their time and money invested into these kids. These kids, they miss a lot of social events for this. And when they become college students, they should be able to catch. I felt like it was long overdue. As far as going far enough, I don't know. I just, right now, yes. Because if you pay everybody, I know you got Title IX or whatever issues. Football's the revenue. Basketball some, but mainly for every university, it's football. It pays for the other sports. Right. But hey, if you got a ladies basketball star and she gets a McDonald's commercial for Connecticut, I think she should get paid for that. You know?
Yeah, I agree with that. I just think the NCAA made a huge mistake with doing the likeness thing, and now if they do start paying players to play, now we could talk maybe a union getting involved in there, and this thing could go out of control really fast, Robert, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think fear is probably what's held it back up to this point. But,
Rob, I hate the NCAA.
And people in other careers can make money inside of college and nobody else can. It just doesn't seem right. I mean, whatever happens as far as that. I mean, it's just not right for somebody not to be able to capitalize on their own likeness.
Well, let me tell you what's worse than the NCAA outlived their usefulness long ago. I mean, when you have a case of an athlete who has a root canal issue and is in a lot of pain, and if the coach takes him to the dentist, he risks losing his eligibility the way it used to be. They're ridiculous, the NCAA. And they're finally starting to really get their comeuppance. And no one should have any sympathy for the NCAA. They've brought everything upon themselves. And now they've got to adjust to the times. It seems like the NCAA is in a survival mode right now.
Bruce Pearl got fired for a picnic in Tennessee.
Right.
It was a picnic and a barbecue, but he was so scared he told the parents to lie, and then it was the cover up worse than the crime.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a barbecue. You said, they had a barbecue. God, please give me a break.
Isn't it ridiculous? So let's stay with the NCAA. We know the NCAA tournament's coming up, and the bigger schools, the most popular, the most traditional powerhouses, are starting to have a lot of problems with this after the freshman year. Yeah. Players leaving to go to the NBA. Now, Kentucky started it. They were a little successful with it, but now they're starting to pay the price. And the big colleges that are allowing this, or I shouldn't say allowing this, but making it a point to let these high school kids know, these great players, that, hey, you're here for 1 year. We're going to help get you out. There's not going to be any kind of any kind of holdback on you. They're not doing so well anymore. And you got the smaller schools that have players there 3-4 years are starting to be the ones that are starting to come up and become the powerhouses in a way. What do you make of all this, Rob?
Yeah, I kind of like it. I think it's a good idea, but to have just players who want to be there. And I was looking up, there is a pro. It's called, oh God, what is this thing called? Overtime Elite. It's funded by Kevin Durant's invested into it, Carmelo Anthony, even the late David Stern, to pay high school kids $100,000 to play professionally in this league. So my thing is, just bring in people who want to be in college 3 and 4 years. I don't think it's going to fall apart. We're still going to have exciting plays and everything. Maybe the skill is not, quote, up to level because the talent level's down. But I actually think the one and done's hurt the NCAA, like you said, more than it's helped. Because that player, if you look at all the number one picks, we talked about this a few weeks ago, very rarely are they the national champ. Very rarely. Kyrie Irving, I think they got put out. Luke got put out in like the first or second round that year. And he was hurt most of that season anyways. I think Anthony Davis back in 2010 was the last one to win. So I'm okay. Hey, if you guys want to go out and make this $100,000 with this elite league in high school, I think that'll help the pro game. because we've got more international players. Luka Doncic coming in, playing well early, helping this team contribute and win early in their career. I think it's good for the NBA and college. Get guys that want to be there. Because I barely watched the regular season in college basketball the last 7
Rob, that sounds good. And in theory, you're right about the majority of the players. But the elite players who can go to the NBA, the true stars, and the type of money they could make, you can't say, well, we only want guys who are going to be there 4 years. I mean, let's be honest about it. Anyone who could leave early and make a fortune of money is going to leave early. And I would even advise them to leave early.
I would advise them not even to go. You could take colleges, you could take classes around your and just don't even
they need, unfortunately, college is sometimes the minor league system for the NBA. They need the year or two of seasoning, and they use it playing in college. So
I think that's going to change though with the G League, this overtime elite for the high school kids. It's something we can't stop. It's just it's that avalanche, guys. It's
Robert, I think it can be slowed down. I think the NFL has done it, requiring kids to stay in school, or they have to wait till their class graduates before they become NFL eligible. See, to me, what you're doing is these big coaches of these big programs. Jack says seasoning. I don't think they season them at all. 1 year is not going to season anything. You're not coaching anymore. All you're doing is you're the stop. You're the popular place to stop, and then you go right into the NBA. So you're not even coaching anymore. Calipari shouldn't even be paid anymore as a coach because really he's not coaching. All he's doing is saying, "Come play with us. We'll give you popularity," and there you go. You go to NBA. So the coaching is all out the window now with these big schools. And so what I think that needs to happen, Robert, and I think that maybe the NBA has to step in. The hell with the G League. The NBA has to step in and say, hey, listen, you're going to come in your third year. You're going to play college basketball. If you get a degree or not, whatever you want to do. But you're going to play college basketball. You're going to become a good player, and you're not going to water down our league either, because that's exactly what's going to happen. Because these people that go to the G League, as Jack says, I believe too, the G League is going to be like it's not even going to be a minor league system. It's going to be like the CFL. Go play for the CFL. That's what the G League means to me. So I think that the NBA has got to step in and right the ship before it's too late.
Yeah, I was with you 2 or 3 years ago, but I could see it's just going. You're going to have too many people come out against it. The Players Association, that could be a strike, a holdout. I mean, I could see that just being a big can of worms. And quite frankly, there are some players. I was just watching again, guys. The Celtics and Lakers. 30 for 30, those 3-part series. And Magic was a 2-year guy. Larry was a 3-year. Larry did not graduate. I want to say Jordan was a 2 or 3-year guy too. So not everybody's a 4-year player. Right. And I would agree. And we've had the minor leagues in baseball forever. And you can just come out whenever you want to. So I can see the opposing arguments. I think we'll just have to deal with it the best we can. I wish we could. In a perfect world, I'm like you. I wish we would just go back to the 3-year thing would be perfect. But I just don't want to copy the NFL like that.
You mentioned Larry Bird. You made me think of a Celtics story. People forget that when Ralph Sampson was in college, he was an all-time great college player. And he was actually drafted by the Celtics. And I think it was at the end of his junior year. And there was talk that he might not come out of college. And Red Auerbach said, what does the kid think he's going to do, become a brain surgeon? And reportedly, Ralph Sampson was very insulted by that because he valued his time in college. And he didn't come out, and he graduated. I mean, I think that may have been – I mean, that's a rarity. I couldn't see that happening today.
Yeah. I think would he go to Virginia? That is not an easy school by no means. It's very tough.
Very true. Very true. So, Robert, I know you follow all sports.
Yeah, and to a certain extent.
Yes.
It's NFL, then it's everything else.
I know a lot of us have limited time. We try to do the best we can, keep it updated and everything. But I know you're all over it. Do you have any NCAA maybe Final Four predictions? I mean, is there any schools that you see that probably definitely would make it to the Final Four?
3 years ago, Gonzaga got to the national championship game. And normally, if Gonzaga was playing this well prior to 4 years ago, I would say that they played a light schedule. The moment will be too big for them. They're always in the Sweet 16. They can't get over the hump. This year, I think they can get over the hump. I think because they've been in the tournament. They've actually been the national championship game. So I think they really do have a legit shot this year. I know there's going to be more pressure because they're undefeated and all that. I can see that playing a part and maybe them folding. But I really do think they can win it this year. Look out for a team like, what is the name of that, Loyola out of Chicago. Remember, they went pretty far a few years ago. Sister, I can't remember her last name, older lady, watched the team for 80 years or something like that. That little Sister Jean or something like that. They did this. Well, they're like a 15th ranked team. They've only got 4 losses this year. I could see them making a push. Alabama, good road. This is in our conference here in the SEC. Really good road record. They have a shot to get in the Final Four. I can see them, somebody like that. I'm not sure about Villanova, Kentucky, and Duke. Duke has got the COVID issue. Kentucky's way down. We was just talking about Kentucky. Rick Pitino's coaching Iona. They have a shot maybe to get to the Sweet 16. I don't know if you guys recall that. But Rick Pitino's back in college.
That'd be a nice story.
Yeah, it's a good comeback story if you ask me. Maybe Kentucky should go after him.
What about giving Georgetown a little love? Patrick Ewing, they win the Big East. Then the NCAA 20, even if they lose their first game, just the idea, the big fella won the Big East as a coach. Something he could always take with him, and that was a nice story.
Yeah, he struggled for years as an assistant. Wasn't really sure he was going to make it as a coach, but he has shown and proved everybody wrong. I know he got a little ticked off about people. I work security, and I've been the guy my supervisors read me the riot act about asking people for ID. I'm sure it was nothing personal, but I love Patrick Ewing. I would love
Joe DiMaggio got stopped by security and wasn't let in Yankee Stadium, and he left in a huff. Joe DiMaggio during the World Series in the 1970s, and
I imagine he was upset too.
It's because they're
it is with some of these security guards. I could understand. Listen, if I were Patrick Ewing, I would get upset too because I'm an iconic player. They should know who I am. But some of these security guards, they might not even be sports fans or basketball fans. And I think people are making too much out of it. But then again, if I were Patrick Ewing, I'd probably be a little annoyed. This is my house. You don't know who I am? Come on, Yeah, if Patrick Ewing didn't have a fit, he didn't create a scene. He just vented a little bit afterwards. Patrick Ewing's a good guy. And I think everyone else picked up on it. And they expanded the story to be more than what Patrick Ewing even wanted it to be.
Right.
Well, he said it. Well, the problem was, Jack, he said it during the press conference. If he didn't say it during the press conference, it wouldn't have been blown out of proportion. I agree with Robert.
He was a little hurt. Listen, if I want to watch the Mac and Jack show after I've left, you have another co-host, and I get stopped by security at the door, Mac, to watch this show. I'd say, don't you know I did this show a while, blah, 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 with Mac? I would be a little taken back, too.
Well, security say, Jack, it's nothing personal, but we're
nothing personal. Nothing.
Well, Jack, don't be so sure, because I may leave orders that you're not allowed.
I leave orders, Listen, Jim Dolan. I heard that Jim Dolan got stopped by security once in the Garden building, and he fired the security guard that stopped him. He didn't know he was the owner, but then I heard Dolan rehired him later on.
That would look terrible if he didn't rehire him. Yeah.
Hey, Robert, we love having you on, man. Folks, go check him out at Skope. He has his own site. He comes on with us every Sunday, except for last week. We had something else going on.
Oh, yeah. Hey, good show last week. I listened to that. That was great.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, Jack and Mac. Oh man,
Jack did a great job with the guests, and we covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, Robert. Other than that, man, you're here every week. He's got a great site over there, Skope. He's everywhere. He's on all audio, almost on all video. He's on the Northeast Streaming Sports YouTube channel. Check him out. He does a great job. And again, Robert, thank you for coming in.
Thanks,
Good
guys.
stuff, Rep.
Have a good one.
See you next week.
So there you go, Jack. Robert Butler coming in for his weekly guest. He has a lot of great thoughts on things, and he's pretty straightforward too when he answers. He isn't too wishy-washy, which I love about him. So, folks, we're going to take our last break. We'll be back up scheduled with Anthony Cervino, one of our guests that we love having on, and he's normally here every Sunday with us too. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with some more. Hold on a second. With some more great information in sports, and we love having you around. So we'll see you in a couple.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org. We all make choices. When it comes to alcohol, kids make choices whether to drink or not.
Bye-bye.
Remember, I'm going to Alex's party tonight and sleeping over.
Hey, have a seat for a second. Remind me about that party again?
Alex is just
And adults make choices whether to talk about it. That's true of parents and every other trusted adult in a kid's life. Kids want to know our expectations when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. They want guidance and honest answers to their questions. And it makes a difference when the message is consistent and part of everyday conversations. So talk with your kids and help lead them on a positive path. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
When you hear the word asthma, you probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. If you experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211 Infoline. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health. In Connecticut, healthy.
You talk and they will hear you every single time.
Oh, we're getting killed. Yeah, well, Kyle's not here. How come? Kicked off the team. Didn't Tim tell you? Kyle and some other kids got caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah. 0 tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's the first offense, right?
That we know of. But why should that matter? He knew not to drink. I made it clear to Matt, that's what we expect from him. What have you said to Tim?
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids try it at this age, so.
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I'm not saying that Matt's going to be this perfect kid, but if I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't drink, how's he going to know?
You think kids that age really listen?
They never admit it, Bill, but they hear more than you think.
Talk. They hear you. For more information about talking with kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Try.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show. We're on live Wednesday through Sunday, 8 to 10 a.m. This is our This Week in Sports special, and we'll be doing this till football comes back up and is ready to go live again, Jack, with all their stuff. And I mean, just there's so much NFL news. Even today, Jack, there's a lot of NFL news in the sports and news. It just dominates, all the news all the time. But when the NBA, the hockey going and everything. Let me see if I get this up here right. Like I said before, I do have a new board that Facebook gave me where I got to kind of fool around a little bit.
Well, Mac, you mentioned with the NFL, well, with the draft being next month, we don't have to actually wait for next month for football news because teams are trying to position themselves for the draft. So we might have some deals made in the meantime. And it really isn't football really is round the clock.
It is. And the next guest we got coming up, Jack, Anthony Cervino, normally joins us every Sunday. And he's one of the most knowledgeable guys I know. Not only is he a fantasy football expert, but the man breaks down the NFL every week at his site at Fantasy Football. Guys, if you get a chance, go check him out, his site. It's unbelievably done. It's well produced. And him and his co-host do a tremendous job. And let's bring them up. How are you doing today, Anthony?
What's going on? Let me adjust my camera. Oh no, okay, I'm here.
Yeah, I got you on a different screen, full view.
Okay.
Great to have you back, Anthony, on the show. We had a great boxing special we did last week where we celebrated the anniversary of the greatest fight of the fight of the century, they call it, between Ali and Frazier.
Yeah.
And we just had on today, I know you know him because you're a Dallas Cowboy fan, Jim Jeffcoat, defensive end, 2-time Super Bowl champion, and he did a great job with us too. So we're really happy that we had him on, and we're really happy we have you back on with us. And some of the thoughts I wanted to talk to you about was, I know fantasy football, you kind of got to get your teams in the league set straight, and there's been a lot of movement. I think the biggest story in football right now is the salary cap and how they're cutting very good to great players to make room under the cap. San Francisco did it with their 2 offensive tackles. Sanders and Cook were cut by the 49ers. The Giants let go of Tate. What are your thoughts on that, Anthony?
This is the time of year where the teams have to make really tough decisions on more notable players. But even like a Golden Tate, he's a little up there in age. He's at the mercenary portion of his career, and we hear the name mercenary a lot. Like Ndamukong Suh and all of these other players, they're at the tail end of their career, so they'll sign these 1-year deals, make a nice payday, and go try to win a championship. So that's where a lot of these veteran players, they're going to start signing these short deals on contenders like a Golden Tate. And we saw the Saints make some moves. Going into this offseason, there were 12 or 13 teams in the red. They were well over the salary cap because of whatever happened with COVID and all the other adjustments to the cap. I think it's finalized at right around $183 million this year. A lot of teams, they need money. They need cap money. They need to maneuver contracts. Like we just saw Patrick Mahomes. He signs that blockbuster contract last offseason. Already this past week, the Chiefs restructured the deal to open up more cap room. Another thing on the Chiefs, they cut their starting set of tackles on the offensive line. Eric Fisher, Mitchell Schwartz were both let go. They are not going to re-sign Austin Ryder, their starting center for the past 2 years. Anthony Sherman, their 8-year fullback, he retired. I don't know how the Chiefs are going to field an offensive line. And as great as those weapons are, if Patrick Mahomes doesn't have time, he's not infallible like people think. We saw that in the Super Bowl. Vegas needs to adjust those Super Bowl odds and put Tampa Bay number 1 because right now they have no line, 0.
So how do you think Patrick Mahomes feels about this, Anthony? I mean, that's what makes quarterbacks great, I think. You got to have like you said, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Johnny Unitas, Tom Brady. If you don't have an offensive line, you can't be competitive.
No, and I think that's why he did restructure. And the language in the deal last year when he initially signed it was that he would be flexible to open up cap room. So he knew this was coming. I think the Chiefs, maybe they have a plan, but they definitely need to, kind of regroup that entire offensive line. They're going to get Tardif back, who was a starting guard, I believe, and he's a doctor, so he elected to go fight COVID. And I saw interviews where he was telling the media, seeing Patrick Mahomes get hit, he couldn't even watch, and he'll definitely be back. So they will get one piece back that they didn't have last year.
When a player restructures, is he actually losing significant money? Is he just deferring money?
They're just moving it around 9 times out of 10. And I'm sure there are cases where if a player signs a big deal and then he regresses in a year or two, and they'll restructure or cut him. And 9 times out of 10, those players see the writing on the wall and they will maybe take a little bit less. But most of the time, they're just moving the money around.
I asked Robert Butler about this. I'm going to ask you too. All these quarterbacks that were available out there, more than I've seen in history. In 3 teams, I knew Dak would have to be signed. That was a given. But how do you feel about Big Ben almost begging the Pittsburgh Steelers to take him back? And then you had a shock, I think shocked everybody, with Cam Newton getting that $14 million contract with incentives.
Well, let's start with Cam. Yes, it's $14 million, but it's just a number. Essentially, this contract's right around $5 million. It might count them against the cap. $7 million of that 14 is incentive based on not only Cam's performance, but also if they somehow make a playoff run and the team's performance. So he has about $7 million tied into that. It's a very similarly structured deal he signed last year with them. And yes, it's surprising, but this doesn't deter New England from going and get a quarterback. They might still pursue Jimmy Garoppolo. They might still draft a quarterback. I think this is a Band-Aid. Maybe they have a plan, and maybe they go get a Mac Jones and let him sit behind Cam and not put him in there right away. The Patriots, they had a league high 7 or 8 players opt out with COVID. A couple of them defensively, Patrick Chung and Hightower, they're both going to come back. They have Cannon coming back on the offensive line. And those other guys are really fringe players like a Brandon Bolden, a really good special teamer for New England. All of those guys are going to come back. Right now, on paper, they also traded for their old right tackle from Oakland, Trent Brown. The Patriots, as long as they put weapons around Cam Newton, as long as they put legitimate weapons, I think they can make a wild card run, if not that division.
You mentioned Mac Jones. He's projected to be about the 5th quarterback taken in the draft. And a few years ago, Lamar Jackson was the 5th quarterback taken in the draft. So is Mac Jones potentially an elite quarterback that's slipping under the radar?
I feel like he's under the radar, but I think teams know who he is. He's just the contrarian, right? All these quarterbacks are mobile. That's the league we're in. Mac Jones is more traditional, but it doesn't mean he can't win football games. Look at the quarterbacks who are still winning Super Bowls. Tom Brady, he's a pocket passer. So these aren't extinct, and I still, outside of Patrick Mahomes, haven't seen the new generation Lamar Jackson win a Super Bowl yet.
Yeah,
and you brought up Big Ben. The Steelers don't have a clue, and they don't have a plan for life after Big Ben. I think they need each other because they don't know what the hell to do with themselves without each other.
Well, they do have Mason Rudolph and Dwayne Haskins.
Yeah, that's what he just said. They don't have anything. Well, Jack was a great point on that, Anthony, right? Here's your iconic quarterback who brought you to a few Super Bowls, won a couple, and he's going public saying, please take me back. Didn't that kind of put the Steelers in a bad position?
And what do you mean?
In other words, if they said, no, we don't want you back, do you think that would have been something that the Pittsburgh Steelers fans might have been upset with? Sort of like Eli Manning in his last couple of years, where, he's an iconic guy in New York. Well, Big Ben is that way in Pittsburgh. I mean, he's up there. You could put him close to Terry Bradshaw. He probably has more records than Terry Bradshaw. Do you think that put the Pittsburgh Steelers in a difficult situation?
I mean, Steelers fans aren't going anywhere, and I feel like that fan base, they want to win more than anything. And when you go 11-0 and then finish the way they finish down the stretch, yeah, I'm sure there's going to be fans upset, but they need to make a football decision. Has Drew Brees worked out for the Saints? Yes, that they've made deep playoff runs for 3 years, but for 3 years we've seen Drew Brees either hurt, and you would think, oh, he's going to come back healthier. No, like his arm dies in December and January, no matter what happens in a regular season. That is a team that should have moved on. And I think Pittsburgh, the writing's on the wall. This has to be the last year for Big Ben. They have to go get a quarterback. And the true Juju Smith-Schuster, he's a free agent. He's probably gone. James Conner, he's a free agent. They're not signing him back. That offensive line, talk about teams losing offensive linemen. Pouncey retired, who's been there forever. Alejandro Villanueva is a free agent, one of the better guards. And I think another guy on that line's a free agent. This might not be a good Steelers team this year.
Right.
You know, the Saints were just mentioned. Drew Brees hasn't officially announced his retirement. And the longer it lingers, the more of a possibility is he's wavering. He might actually want to come back. What did the Saints do with him?
He restructured the contract, which was the first thing that happened in the offseason, because before that, I think the Saints were right around $69 million over the cap. So that had to happen, just like the Steelers. They were well over the cap. Big Ben, he takes a lot less to stay. I think the Saints, just like I think about the Steelers and these other teams who hold on too long, the Saints should go with Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill, find their quarterback, like Drew Brees, and I'm playing fantasy football here, but if he wants to play, let him go to Denver.
Yeah.
Let him go somewhere else.
That's a good point. I mean, so what do you think now, Anthony, after we made all these assumptions that all these quarterbacks were going to move, that, a couple quarterbacks aren't happy. And it seems right now, unless something big happens, that everybody's going to stay pretty much in place. So do you think that with Andy Dalton out there, you got, Alex Smith out there, they're both accurate passers, a little past their prime, granted, but they are still decent quarterbacks. Do you see them, and maybe I think Trubisky's staying with Chicago, do you see either of them two maybe getting a starting job?
The question would be where, there was Andy Dalton, Marcus Mariota, Cam, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I think I'm missing one more name. That one of these guys or two of these guys aren't going to be a starting quarterback next year. I think Andy Dalton, unfortunately, he might be a backup for the rest of the way, or injury reliant, where he goes to a team and their quarterback gets hurt, like last year with Dak. Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's leaning towards retirement. Now I'm seeing reports Miami might bring him back. That is the worst thing you can do for Tua.
Yeah.
I don't think Tua psychologically can handle a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick behind him, where the team supports him. I think that's going to affect him. I'm not a Tua guy, obviously, but and it's also early. A free agency hasn't even started yet. The tampering period begins, I think, at midnight. We're going to see moves like it was Goff and Stafford trading places. Cam Newton stays put. Dak is staying put. But I think there's something real here with Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson leaving their franchises. One of them, and I think there's a strong possibility for both, are not going to be with their teams. Now, the issue for Seattle, they have to eat a lot of dead money.
Yeah.
If they move, and that's the issue there. Watson can be done. Wilson's going to be the tough one. But again, if I'm the Bears, I'm giving everything to get Russell Wilson.
I heard that's what's going on, as a matter of fact. So we got two young quarterbacks. You mentioned one of them, Tua, the other one being Darnold. Both of them, there's been rumors that, that they're not really totally convinced these two guys are going to be going forward. Do you see any prospective trades for draft picks, or maybe for players in draft picks, that these two guys move?
Yeah, for Sam Darnold, I'm not sure if Joe Douglas drafted him, and I know Robert Saleh, he has zero ties to him. and he hasn't done much. Sam Darnold, he's more of just, this is what he was. This is why
he's not Joe Douglas's guy. No,
right.
He's not.
And the same thing with Tua. Like, if there's already questions, the good thing for both of these teams, you look at the Jets, they have the second most cap room, and I'm on overthecap.com, and the Dolphins, they're in the top 10. There's a lot of money there to where if you have to absorb dead money, if you have to maneuver things, like especially the Jets, why wouldn't you go? Like, are you that sold on Zach Wilson? Are you that sold on Trey Lance or Justin Fields? I would rather have the known entity in Deshaun Watson, or even a Russell Wilson, and move a couple of draft picks to get guys will work in this league. Yeah. Like, I know Trevor Lawrence, there's a high probability he works, but, what if he's Rick Meyer?
Right.
Remember him back in the Drew Bledsoe draft, 93?
I remember him and Ryan Leaf very well, Anthony. So, I mean, I know there's instances where there's a lot of expectations and it doesn't end up working out. So as a fan, you're a Dallas Cowboy fan. I happen to be a Giant fan. How can you, as a fan, stay loyal to a team when all this free agency, all these cuts happens? How do you stay loyal to the team and not become? A lot of people have become, player followers. Brady left. A lot of Patriot fans are following Tom Brady. That's changed a lot, Anthony.
Yeah, and I think it's fantasy football plays a big role in it too, because in fantasy football, you actually shouldn't be drafting with your heart and be like, oh, I'm going to draft Eli Manning, with the second round pick. It doesn't, back when Eli was playing, you just didn't do that. And you're drafting teams or players from all 32 teams, and you're getting to know more players than you ever did. Instead of just watching your local broadcast or your team's broadcast, you're watching everything, because you have an investment in it. But I still think that people love their teams. Like, I'll always be a Cowboys fan, but do I root for the Ravens because I was a big Ray Lewis fan back in the day? Yeah, I have other teams I want to see well, and I have teams that I hate.
Right.
But I think it's good for the league for fans to follow everybody. I think it's a good thing for the NFL as a whole, because it's just more revenue that's going to come from this. Like, you're not just buying Giants jerseys. I'm not just buying Cowboys jerseys. I have a closet full of jerseys from different teams and different players.
Right. The gambling issue, Anthony, a lot of states are going, they're legalizing gambling. I think that does nothing but make the NFL bigger. Do you see anything where they're going to start worrying about some influences from the gambling community on who wins, who loses, who goes where, refs? Do you think this is going to open that can of worms that opened up in boxing and other sports before?
I mean, I'm sure there's always the conspiracy theorists. I mean, with the tuck rule or whatever that was with Brady and the snow, there's always rumors, and I think that just comes with sports. But it would have happened already with the way fantasy is, and gambling's been around. You just, instead of doing it legally on FanDuel, you went to your bookie.
Right.
You mentioned Tua before. How come people are down on him and they were so high on him going into his rookie year? He didn't perform poorly for the Dolphins. They won with him, and he went through the rookie learning experience. Just because he wasn't as good as Justin Herbert and Burrow last year doesn't mean he's not going to be an elite quarterback in the league. How come people are down on him, based on those few games?
Well, the games that he really struggled in were the games that they needed him most. Week 17, you win, you're in the playoffs. You're getting blown out, and that's not all his fault. But like Justin Herbert or guys like Dak or Watson, you expect your quarterback to bring you back. Buffalo smashed him, and Tua threw 361 yards, which was a career high, but only one touchdown and 3 interceptions. That game against Kansas City, and I'm not a Tua guy, but I almost started buying in, and it was a shootout. I'm like, this guy's going toe to toe with Kansas City and those weapons, but he did have an interception in that game, and it was a key interception at the end, I believe. He was pulled against the Denver Broncos at halftime, and that was a Denver team that defense was all banged up and in shambles. That was a game Miami should have won, but then we'd see Tua play okay. He played game manager when they beat the Rams in week 8. So who is Tua? I know that there are times that I've watched him, and when it looks like he can go score a touchdown or try to run for that extra yard, he just doesn't. It just seems like he's a gear slower, and I don't know if it's a learning curve mentally. But when you see Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson run, they run at a different level. Well, Lamar's on his own level.
Guys, I recall a young Peyton Manning getting shut out by the Jets in a playoff game. So
yeah.
I mean, what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I don't think the fans down on him. When I heard GMs, older GMs, yeah, they're coming back and they're saying, I don't know if Tua is really going to be as good as we expected, and that's where it gave me, pause that if these guys are the ones that evaluate and have run teams and even players, as Anthony said, once that happens, then I start looking at it a little bit harder than just my opinion, So that's why I've mentioned it before, also too, Anthony. So
I remember 2 years ago was Vic Fangio's first year in Denver, and it was Drew Lock's rookie year. And I remember Fangio saying, "I think this kid's more of a baseball player," and that stuck. Like, if your head coach doesn't think you should be on that field, you're not going to work. Probably not going to work out. That he should know more than anybody. And when there are unnamed players from the Dolphins telling the media, telling beat writers, "Hey, don't mention my name," but I don't think he's it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's when, again, Anthony, that's when I really start looking at things when people that's their profession are saying, hey, this guy isn't as all as what we thought he would be. And, that tanking for Tua thing that everybody made a big deal out of. It looks like Herbert and Bortles right now, right at this point anyway, who knows, a year from now, are a lot better choices, and maybe Miami wishes they went maybe with Herbert. We'll find out. That's for sure in this next year, because if he don't do it this year, I don't see him lasting with Miami too much longer. One last question before we end the show, Anthony. When you're and fantasy football, as you know, is not my forte. I mean, I play a little bit in it. When you start looking at all these moves and where teams are going, for instance, like Golden Tate, suppose he goes to San Francisco, or he goes to Tampa Bay. I mean, does this increase the value of that player because he goes to that better team?
Yes and no. Like any receiver that goes to Tampa Bay, in theory, he's getting Tom Brady, but they have 5 capable pass catchers, and there's only so many targets to go around. And then maybe a bad team, you take in consideration, why are they bad? Is their defense this bad? So you want to get a player from the bad team's offense, because if they're down, they're going to throw the ball a lot more. So, it's a player by player basis, and it's a lot to cover, but I usually like teams, wide receivers on a team that pass the ball a lot, or they're in shootouts a lot. But at the running back position, you want a running back on a good team, because they're going to run the clock out a lot more.
Great points.
And does that running back catch passes too?
Right.
Then that's more touches and more opportunity.
That's great points, because people might think the opposite, where hey, I'm going to a great team, so he's going to get more. Well, they're a great team for a reason, and you make a great point there, Anthony. We really appreciate you coming on this week.
Absolutely.
We get you back next week, folks. Go check out Fantasy Football Face Off. They got an unbelievable Twitter show there. It's done really well, and not only do they do fantasy, they break down the NFL with the best of them. Anthony, again, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to next week. It's going to be busy this week.
It sure is. Have a great Sunday. Have a great Sunday, Anthony. So there you go, Jack. Great Anthony Cervino doing his thing. I mean, there's nobody that I can think of that knows more about football, breaking down the games, players, and, of course, I guess being an expert in fantasy football, you would have to know all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the quarterback moves have been made, Mac. Just not this past week. Matthew Stafford, the Lions to the Rams, Carson Wentz, the Eagles to Indianapolis. The ranks are going to get a little thin. A number of these quarterbacks are going to get drafted in the first half of the first round. So
Yeah.
there's going to be activity in the Sam Darnold saga, in the Deshaun Watson saga. Let's see how that plays out.
Great point, Jack. I wasn't thinking of it. The thing I was thinking is we were counting like 10 to 12 quarterbacks that could move, and only 2 did. And that, that was kind of shocking to me. Well, 3 if you count the trade. So, I mean, it was kind of shocking that we were waiting for this.
The Cam Newton one was the only one that was a mild surprise. But when you look at his contract carefully, his base pay isn't that high, so New England's not taking a big risk. I expect them to still be looking for a quarterback elsewhere.
Another great point, Jack. I think when you make a thing for incentives to a player like that, you're telling them, hey, we're going with you. The only way you can make them incentives is if you do this, this, and this, and then you get another quarterback, and then that incentives are out the window. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Some great stuff today. Thank you again to Jim Jeffcoat, Robert Butler, Anthony Cervino. Folks, we'll be back Wednesday. Check us out. Check out the Northeast Streaming Sports YouTube channel and the site on Facebook. A lot of great shows. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great day. And Jack, say goodbye to the folks.